The days were cold as winter crept into the small town of Birchwood. Snow had started to blanket the earth, and a quiet chill filled the air. People hurried through the daily lives, bundled up in coats, their faces hidden beneath scarves. But for Evelyn, time seemed to stretch longer than it ever had before. It was as though the very weight of the season had settled deep in her heart. Evelyn had never thought of herself as a person who would feel the weight of the world. She had always been strong, always carried her own burdens, her quiet strength always hiding the tears behind her eyes. But now, in the quiet of her home, with the fire crackling softly in the hearth, she could feel her heart breaking a little more with every passing day. Evelyn sat by the window, her fingers tracing the cool glass. She had done this countless times before, watching the snow fall, feeling the familiar sense of longing in her chest. The town was peaceful, and yet, for her, it was a place full of memories, memories that would never leave her, no matter how far she tried to run. It had been 2 years since Harry had walked out of her life. 2 years since his sudden departure left her world in pieces, each piece a reminder of the love they had shared and the pain that had followed. She had always believed that love would be the thing to save them both. But love, she had learned, was often not enough to hold back the forces of fate. Their love had been simple, yet powerful. Harry had come into her life like a summer breeze, warm and gentle, yet strong enough to sweep her off her feet. She had been young, naive even, when she first met him. She had been so sure of what the future would bring, so certain that they would face it together. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. It had all started on a quiet afternoon in the park. She had been sitting on a bench, reading a book, when he sat next to her. His smile had been the first thing she noticed, warm and kind, with a sparkle in his eyes that made her heart race. Harry had always had that effect on people. He was the kind of person who could make you feel like the world was a little bit brighter just by being near you. And, for Evelyn, he made her believe that love could heal all things. Their first date had been simple. A walk through the streets, a cup of coffee at the corner cafe, and then a long talk under the stars. They had shared their hopes, their dreams, and their fears. They had laughed together and talked about the future as though nothing could ever break the bond between them. For months, their love had grown. It had been the kind of love that filled every corner of her life, bringing her peace even on the hardest days. And when Harry held her, everything felt right in the world. His embrace was warm and safe, a place where she could close her eyes and forget all the pain and worries that life had thrown at her. But nothing lasts forever. The day Harry left, Evelyn had begged him to stay. She had cried, her heart breaking with every word she spoke. But Harry had remained calm, distant even. He had tried to explain his dreams, his ambitions, the things he wanted to accomplish, the way he had always felt like he was meant for something more than the small town life they had shared. You deserve someone who can give you everything you want, Evelyn, he had said, his voice strained, his eyes avoiding hers. And I can't be that person. But Evelyn had refused to listen. She had always believed that love could conquer all, that together, they could face anything. She hadn't understood then what Harry had known deep in his heart: some things are beyond our control. He had left quietly, leaving behind a world of broken promises and unspoken words. Evelyn had stood there, numb, her hands gripping the doorframe, watching him disappear into the night. That night, she cried herself to sleep. And every night after that, she cried herself to sleep, wishing, hoping, praying that one day he would return. But he never did. Now, 2 years later, Evelyn found herself still searching for answers. Her days had become a blur of routine, and yet, her heart remained frozen in time. She had tried to move on, tried to fill the emptiness with distractions and busy work, but the ache in her chest never fully went away. She could still feel him. His presence lingered in the rooms of their small home, in the quiet corners where they had once shared the dreams. His laughter echoed in her mind, and the memory of his embrace was still so vivid, so real, that it almost felt as though he was still there, holding her close. But the truth was, Harry was gone, and nothing could bring him back. Evelyn had spent countless nights wondering what had gone wrong. Was it something she had done? Had she not been enough for him? Or had he simply never truly loved her the way she had loved him? The questions swirled in her mind, unanswered and unresolved. But as the years passed, she began to understand something. She began to understand that love, no matter how deep, could not always prevent the inevitable. Sometimes, love was not enough to hold back the tide of fate, to stop the changes that were destined to come. And sometimes, love meant letting go. One day, as Evelyn sat at the window, staring out into the swirling snow, a familiar figure appeared in the distance. She rubbed her eyes, thinking that she was imagining things. But no, It was him. Harry. He stood there, at the edge of the street, looking up at her window with a look of longing in his eyes. Her heart skipped a beat. She had never expected this moment to come. After all this time, after all the heartache, Harry had returned. Evelyn's first instinct was to run to him, to embrace him and never let go. But as she stood there, frozen in place, she felt something shift within her. The warmth that had once filled her heart now felt like a distant memory. She had loved him, more than anything in this world, but she had also suffered. She had learned the painful lesson that sometimes, the greatest act of love is letting go. The door creaked open, and there he was, standing before her. His eyes were full of sorrow, and there was an apology in his gaze that she had never expected to see. He reached out, his hands trembling slightly. "I'm sorry, Evelyn," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was a fool. I was afraid of what we could be, of what I was leaving behind. But now I realize, I made the wrong choice." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to cry, to scream at him for leaving her, for making her suffer in silence. But instead, she stood there, still as stone, her heart aching with the weight of everything that had happened. "Why now, Harry?" she asked softly. "Why after all this time?" He shook his head, his hands falling to his sides. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to take me back. But I need you to know that I never stopped loving you." Evelyn closed her eyes, a single tear slipping down her cheek. She had spent so much time wishing for this moment, but now that it had come, she felt more lost than ever. What was she supposed to do with this love? Could she forgive him? Could she allow herself to love him again, after everything that had happened? But then she remembered, love was not about holding on to someone for the sake of the past. It was about understanding, about letting go when it was time to do so. And so, with a heavy heart, Evelyn took a step back. "I can't, Harry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I can't go back to the way things were. I loved you with all my heart, but sometimes love isn't enough." Harry's face fell, the weight of her words sinking in. He reached out for her one last time, but she took another step away, shaking her head. And there, in that moment, she felt the bitter kiss of fate. It had brought them together and torn them apart. It had shaped their love, and now, it had taken it away. She had loved him deeply, but sometimes, love had to be set free. As the snow continued to fall, Evelyn closed the door softly behind her. She had no more tears to shed. The power of their embrace had once held her world together, but now, it was the memory of that love that would carry her forward. Fate had kissed her bitterly, but in that kiss, she found the strength to finally let go.